In this video, I'm going to add some details and weathering to this N-scale harbor scene. First off are some toggle blocks. These secure the float to the apron while docked to align the tracks. I couldn't find any 3D models of these, so I decided to model them myself in Tinkercad, and then I printed them out on my Mars 3 resin printer. These are tiny, bit of a challenge to paint them. But they came out okay. I also had modeled some bolts, and these I painted with a very sharp toothpick and some silver paint, and used my magnifying glasses. I'm going to use 4 between the tracks. I have some extras, so in case you're interested in them, let me know in the comments. When I went to install them, I noticed the decks are not even. However, in my reference photos, I did notice that some railcar barges or floats have a plate on the deck, so I found some styrene of the right thickness. I cut it to length, and then filed it to fit around the rail holders I had installed in a previous video. Fits fine. A bit of primer, yellow paint, and then I installed them on the deck. The end ones were rounded to match the curve of the deck ends. Next project was to install some lights so that the railcar float could be unloaded and loaded at nighttime. I drilled a hole on land for the first light with my pin vise, and I found a bunch of LED street lights that I had bought a few years ago. These will work perfectly. Once I had threaded the wires through the hole, I glued in the light with some tacky PVA glue. I also installed 2 more lights on the float apron. However, one of them ended up being too close to the track, so I had to drill a new hole and then test with the longest railcar I have. This auto rack. Still very close, but it does clear the pole. In order to thread the wires of the lights on the apron through the hole underneath, I twisted a loop on the end of the wires and used a rigid piece of wire bent into a hook to pull the wires down. I also soldered on some extra wire to the lights wires furthest to the right. Those wires were also pulled through with a hook. I then attached the wires to the underside of the apron with some clear tape. The wiring underneath is quite simple, and here's how it looks at nighttime. I think it's enough light. I saw in some prototype photos that water tends to accumulate on the deck of the railcar floats or barges, I guess simply from waves splashing up. I simulated this with some gloss varnish applied with a paintbrush. Off camera, I also added some puddles that had some orange paint mixed in with a gloss varnish. I'm not sure if I like that look. I might change it later. I also added some sign of life. This seagull is only one of many I will be adding to this scene in a future video. I realized I didn't weather the metal girders of the float apron. These would naturally start rusting due to the salt water and moist air. I used my burnt sienna pan pastel again to dust on some rust-looking powder. I had to reach over from the other side, where my workbench is, to do the back side of the girders. I also dusted on some raw umber on the apron deck to lighten up the dark color a bit. I then used a graphite stick to simulate paint wearing off the toggle blocks. And I did a bit on the cleats as well. Next step was to add some vegetation to cover up some holes. This was simple to do with some tacky PVA glue and coarse turf clumps in various colors. Final detail was to add some life preserver stands to keep the workers safe. I 3D printed these again on my Mars 3 and painted them a dark orange, which I custom mixed from red and a light orange. These are tiny. I then got my sharp toothpick again to add the white stripes to each one. This was not easy work. Without my magnifiers, it would have been almost impossible. And even then, it's not perfect. I then cut the preservers off their supports to paint the backside. They needed a bit of sanding first to get rid of the support nibs. Off camera, I also 3D printed some stands, painted them orange, and added some dry brushing of rust colors. This was glued into place again with tacky glue. But look carefully because I clearly didn't. I glued it to the hatch cover. I then applied a tiny drop of glue to each hanger and glued on a life preserver. Here you can see it close up. Also on the left you can see the effect of the graphite stick. I broke out the N-scale drone for a quick flyby of the whole scene. You might notice an addition that is still in the raw stages that I 3D printed this weekend. That's going to be the next video in this series. And in case you missed any of the videos in the series, check the description or pinned comment to watch the rest. Until next time, thanks for watching.